Welcome to Christy's Bits of Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Christy. My goal is to help you start your mornings off right by sharing a short story or a parable that will motivate and encourage you to live your best life with God. By using the infinite wisdom found in His Word, you truly can live a life of happiness and peace in Christ. I'm living proof. I hope you'll stick around and subscribe. Also, if you like what you hear, please share with your friends and family so they can scoop up some bits of wisdom for themselves. Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of the podcast. I hope you had a great Monday and I hope you'll have an even better Tuesday today. Today's episode, I want to title, What Will You Make with Your Clay? And I've been thinking a lot lately about how we all have different lives. We all start out um, in different circumstances. Nobody chooses where they're born. Nobody chooses the circumstances they're born into or the families. That just happens. We're all dealt a hand that we have to play in life. And we can start out one place, but that doesn't mean we have to stay there. We can ultimately end up with an entirely different life if we choose if we choose if we choose to. So anyway, so I got to thinking about one time when I was living in Virginia. I had taken a beginner pottery class for a few weeks. I had always been interested in it, never done it, didn't want to buy a home kit because I had no idea what I was doing. And so I wanted to learn how to make something simple like a little ashtray or just a little bowl or whatever. Um, And I thought, well, it's probably going to be challenging, but it's going to be really fun too. So I remember after I had signed up, the first evening class, I had gotten there and I was so excited to think that, I could really make something out of a lump of clay that wasn't there before. It just always fascinated me how artists and sculptors, and even the woodworkers here in Tennessee, I look at them sometimes and I think, how do they take just a lump of clay or a blank canvas or a tree trunk and literally like carve something or make something or paint something that's not even there. It's just fascinating to me. So the thought of doing that just yeah, it was just really exhilarating to me. So I left early that day and I went down there and waited outside. Got there even before the teacher did. And so everybody started gathering around, and then the teacher came and she let us in, and we all took our places. And I looked around the room, and I thought, I wonder if everybody was as happy and anxious as I was. And I guess they were because everybody appeared to be smiling at each other uh, as she handed us our aprons, and we all put them on. And so after she told us what we were going to be doing and stuff, she sat down at her wheel and she started showing us what to do. She explained, how we have to put the clay on there, what you got to do with your feet, all this stuff. And so then the time came for us to set out on our own and create our own little masterpieces, or so I thought. So she came around the classroom and she handed each one of us a clump of clay and told us to put it on the wheel in front of us and begin whenever she instructed us to begin. And so I was so happy, to have my clay laying there. I couldn't wait to get started. I was imagining this like exquisite piece of, whatever. I was going to have this really nice, whatever. To me, it would have been like the Ming Dynasty vase or whatever, once I was done. In reality, it wasn't. But anyway, so I looked at my clay and I looked over at my neighbor's clay and I noticed that she had her clay seemed it was a lot bigger than mine. It seemed to be twice as big as mine. And I thought, my clay seems awfully little. So I looked around the room and I noticed that I had the smallest piece of clay there was. Um, so I wondered if like the size of the clay would affect the outcome. If it would affect what we were trying to do. But anyway, so she started to tell us how to, put the clay on the wheel and how to position our hands, how to press the pedal. And then I really started to panic. I thought, okay, so I don't have enough clay to make my beautiful creation. And I wondered what I would really end up with in the end. If I wanted to make a bowl, would I end up with like, just this little, like a thimble? I mean, of course, had more clay than that, but, I was concerned because I didn't feel like I had enough. So whenever she stopped talking, and she allowed for questions, I raised my hand and I explained that my lump of clay seemed to be a lot smaller than everybody else's. And I was worried, that I wouldn't be able to make something as nice as they could, out of what they had been given. And she smiled and she assured me that it didn't matter how big or how small the lump was. It was all in whatever we did with it after it was given to us, and that it was the finished product that really mattered. Well, that really didn't settle my mind at all, but I went ahead and began to wedge my clay, and I started to spin my wheel. And then a little while later, when I felt like I was getting the hang of it, I must have got a little too self-assured, and I pressed the hard pedal harder with my foot. And needless to say, the wheel just seemed like it sped up and it spun out of control, and it threw my clay off center. And that wrecked the whole entire piece that I had created. I mean, which was really nothing. But I had started to shape it a little bit. But anyway, you know, it felt, I mean, at that point in time, it was really nothing, but it felt like something to me because at least it wasn't that square clump that I'd started with, right? So in my frustration, I stopped the wheel, I gathered my clay back up, and I wedged it again so I could um, keep going, so I could continue. So over the next hour, I did that several times. And each time I did, I got more frustrated with the whole process. I thought, I'll never get this right. I'll never make something beautiful to take home. And so I looked around the room, and it seemed like everybody else was catching on, and it seemed like they were progressing really well. And I could actually see a bowl taking shape on their wheels. Um, while mine still looked like just a rock. Mine looked like a rock. And I was upset, and I just wanted to like throw it all in the trash can and leave. And the teacher, she must have known that I was aggravated because she came over and helped me one on one and tried to guide me through the process. And she explained that the most important step was to center the clay on the wheel, and keeping it centered during the process was key. And that even if the clay got off by even a half inch, it would throw everything off and the whole project would halt. I'd have to get back on track, and then that would cost a lot of time. So I kept that in mind as she explained that working with clay was tedious, and but it was worth it in the end. And she explained to me that um, it wasn't a race that we were running to see who could finish first, um, and make their bowl first, but it was a journey to make something beautiful that we could look back on and be proud of years later. So I nodded, I smiled, and I continued to work. So needless to say, after several classes over the next few weeks of making mistakes and starting again, and having to wedge my clay again, put it back on the wheel, um, I finally ended up with a cute little bowl um, that unfortunately sat at somewhat of an angle on the table, but it was mine. It wasn't perfect, but it was something that I had created with my own two hands, and with the help of my teacher. So I asked her on the last day of class why she had given me the smallest lump of clay, because that still bothered me. Even after a few weeks, it still bothered me why she gave me such a tiny lump of clay. Was there something to it? Was there a reason that I hadn't gotten as much as anybody else? And she shrugged her shoulders and said, I didn't do it on purpose. And she hadn't given it to me on purpose. That's just how, she was just handing out clay, and I happened to get a block that was smaller. Um, and she reminded me that it didn't matter how big that the clay was or how small that it was, because something beautiful can be made out of whatever you have to work with. And she was right. My bowl was beautiful to me. My bowl was smaller than everybody else's, but it brought me as much joy as theirs brought them, and it served the same purpose as theirs did. It might not be able to hold as much as theirs did, but I was still able to use it. So that taught me a valuable lesson in life. It doesn't matter how much you have or what you have to work with. It matters what you do with it. Um, Life can hand us a small amount of clay, but we can still make something beautiful out of it if we work at it. Um, I've met people who weren't born into the most desirable families or situations, like myself. I was um, born into a very dysfunctional family, a lot of problems. I lived a very dysfunctional life growing up. My childhood was not ideal. It was nowhere near ideal. A lot of dysfunction, a lot of heartache, a lot of sadness and sorrow. But I have taken what I was given, what I was born into, and I've worked hard to make something beautiful out of it. Um, I've had things, that other people view as hindrances and setbacks in getting ahead. But I have found that the amount of clay that I have is enough to make something beautiful in the end. It's just up to me to make it. I had a friend years ago. He told me, he said, "Christy, life is what you make it." And that's so true. Life is what we make it. Um, and I've watched other people over the course of my life who have had who they think they have to have like a ton of money to make life great, or a huge house, or just stuff, all this stuff. I've watched people back home in West Virginia who um, lived up hollers, who would go take out $50,000 loan to get a boat and then not be able to pay it back, and they struggled, and it's because they thought they had to have things to make them happy. um, and in their pursuit of having the biggest and the best, they just wore themselves out. Because all you need to do is take what you've been given and make something beautiful out of that. Um, and like my teacher in the class, God knows how much clay to give us in our lives, and He knows what we can do with it. He has faith in us that we can take what little bit that we have and make a beautiful life. I know I did it, and mine is just as good for me as my neighbor who lives in $1 million house. I may not have what the world views as um, valuable, or I may not be successful in the way the world views it, as far as like having material goods and stuff like that. But I have a beautiful life. I have a good life. Um, so, like I said, life is what you make it. And there's other lessons in this story too. Our teacher in life is the Holy Spirit. And when we're frustrated and we feel like we're not getting it right, like I did with my clay on the wheel, and the Holy Spirit comes to us and He guides us on how to do things the right way, just like my teacher did. And when we feel like giving up because we've seemed like we've made a mess out of things, He encourages us to go on. He lets us know we're not alone and He's right there with us. Um, I know this to be true because, like I said, in my life, there's been so many times when I've messed up and I got frustrated because I wasn't perfect like I thought God required me to be. But the Spirit of God let me know that He loves me even though I'm not perfect. Um, but that's not to say that perfection shouldn't be our goal, because it should be. But perfection will not be something that we attain here on earth. That will come in heaven. But we have to strive each day to walk before God with a clean heart and a pure heart, full of love for Him. And if we make mistakes, He will come to us like my teacher did and show us how to do things the right way. And I was reminded of that pottery class when I was scrolling through social media over the last few days, looking at tons of pictures of those who have been blessed to take luxurious vacations this summer. A cousin of mine just got back from Paris and Athens and the Netherlands. And I thought about those who have the ability to just get up and go anytime they want to every year. And I thought about how life seems to have smiled on some people, but not so much on others, because I also see people who struggle each day just to put food on their table, even though they work just as hard as the next person. And then I thought about how you can have happiness if you really want it, if you have Jesus in your life. And there's nothing, like I said the other day, there's nothing wrong with having things as long as things don't have you. When you put God front and center, you can make something beautiful out of your life, no matter how big your clay is, no matter where you started from in life. Like I said, I started from a really bad point in my life, very, very dysfunctional family, a lot of horrible things that went on, a lot of horrible things that happened to me and my sister when we were little. But look how far God's brought me. I may not have the biggest bowl. I may not have the Ming Dynasty vase or whatever that's called, but I have a beautiful life. God's made me a beautiful life. So it didn't matter how big my clay was. I keep my life centered around God, just like the teacher taught me how to center the clay, and I keep my life centered around Him, and because of that, it's a beautiful life. So, like I said, it's not what you start with. It's about what you finish with. So all you have to do is give your heart to the Lord and keep Him in the center. And at the end, you can look back and be proud of what you have created. So some helpful verses that I'll give you today: Matthew 6:33, John 16:13, Romans 3:10, and Psalm 51:10. So I hope that this has helped you today. If you're struggling, like everybody does sometimes, I hope that this has given you some encouragement to take whatever you have right now in your life, whatever you're dealing with, and just say, you know what, it's not really where I want to be. It's not really what I wanted, but I'm going to take what I have and I'm going to make something beautiful out of it. I will catch you guys next time.